Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to make sense of the preview options in Lightroom. In this video tutorial we're going to look at the two types of previews that are available in Lightroom 5, the regular previews and the new smart previews. Now, regular previews were available in Lightroom 4 and earlier, so you're going to learn something here even if you're using Lightroom 4, but you may also see why these smart previews in Lightroom 5 are so useful. To get started, we're going to import some images, so I'm just going to click on Import. And I have some images in a folder that I want to import into Lightroom. Here they are, and they're my preview samples. Now, as I'm importing these images into Lightroom from wherever they happen to come from, I'm given some options in the file handling area here. I can build regular previews and I can also build smart previews. Now, these two options are not mutually exclusive, so I can build both. I can build regular previews and smart previews because they do two completely different things. As a habit, I like to build smart previews for my images as I import them into Lightroom, and you'll see why in a minute. So I have that checkbox checked. For regular previews, these are the type of previews that you've always been able to build in Lightroom. You get some options. You can choose minimal, embedded and sidecar, standard and one-to-one. Now, these are increasing in size, so minimal are very small. In fact, they're so small as to be practically useless in practice anyway, so they're not advised. Embedded and sidecar and standard previews are the recommended options, and I use standard. One-to-one are very large previews. It might seem like they would be the best to create, but in fact they waste a lot of disk space, so it's recommended that you don't select those. So standard is a really good choice here, so I'm going to click to select that. I have my images in a folder on my drive, so I just want to add them in to the Lightroom catalog. I'll click Import. And then let's go to the previous import collection in the catalog. Those are the images that we're just busily now importing into Lightroom. We're told that smart previews were built or already exist for these 10 photos. Now, you always get that message even if they're brand new images in the catalog, so don't be surprised that it says already exist, because they probably don't. But they do now. So I'll click OK. And whenever I click on any of these images, you'll see that I'm told that Lightroom can find the original right now, and it knows that it also has a smart preview for this particular image. Now, that allows you to check other images in your folder to see if you have the regular image and smart previews. I'm just going to a collection of images I shot many years ago in Venice, and you'll see that each of these is only the original photo. There are no smart previews for these. Now, you're going to find that that's the case if you're working in a catalog that's been upgraded from one version of Lightroom to another. It may well be that these images were actually first imported in Lightroom 2 or Lightroom 3, and every time I've upgraded Lightroom, the catalog has been upgraded and these images have just appeared inside the catalog. It wasn't an option with those earlier versions to create smart previews. But if I want to, I can do that even after the images are imported. And the way I would do that is to press Ctrl A to select all the images in this particular folder. I could also select all the images in my catalog, but we're just going to do this one folder right now. And having selected them, I can now create smart previews by choosing Library and then Previews, and I'm going to build smart previews for these images. You can see too that in the past, if you've built, for example, only minimal previews, you could build standard size previews as well, but this is going to be two separate processes. You only get one choice in this dialog as to what you're going to select. So for now, I'm going to build smart previews. And Lightroom will go ahead now and create smart previews for all 1600 odd images in this particular folder. And as it does, we'll see a link here that will tell us that there are originals now with smart previews rather than what was the case before where we had originals but no smart previews. So that's how to create smart previews even after the fact. Let's have a look now at what smart previews are giving to us in the way of editing options in Lightroom 5 that we would not have had in earlier versions of Lightroom. This is the folder on my disk where we just imported those 10 images. Now I'm going to take 5 of these out, so I'm just going to delete 5 of these images. This is not something I would ever recommend that you do, but I'm going to use it as an example so that you can see what happens when an image is not available to Lightroom, because these are the images that Lightroom just imported in. There were 10 of them, and now 5 of them just don't exist anymore. They've been totally removed from that disk. So I'm going to close down my Windows Explorer window. Let's return to Lightroom and let's go back to that latest import collection. Here it is, previous import. And here Lightroom is reporting that there were 10 images that were imported with the previous import. Let's just click on this first one and you can see that Lightroom has an original and a smart preview. But when I go and select this image, the situation's different. There is no original image, but Lightroom's able to find a smart preview. And that will be the same for this image, and this one, and this, and this. There is no original photo because I deleted them. Right now, they're in the trash. But this little indicator here tells us that there's a smart preview for this image and that what we're seeing right now when we click on it is the smart preview. Now you will know if you've been using Lightroom for some time, over some number of versions, that if an image is not available to Lightroom, if it's on a drive that's disconnected or if it's been deleted, as soon as you try and take that image into the develop module, you'll get an error. Well, the situation is not that if you're using smart previews. I have this image selected. We've only got a smart preview for it. Let's click on the develop module. Well, now we're able to edit this image. We're seeing the image. We're able to make changes to it. We can do pretty much anything with it except print it in high quality because this is a smaller version, Smart Preview. Smart Previews are typically somewhere between 5 and 10% of the size of the original photo. So let's go back into Lightroom's library catalog, and I'm going to go and remove another image from the disk, one that for which there is no smart preview. And let's just see what will happen in earlier versions of Lightroom and what will happen also in Lightroom 5 if you don't build your smart previews. I'm back here in the folder of images that we're working in, the 10 images that we imported into Lightroom. I've chosen Edit Undo and I've brought back in the missing images, but image 10 I've just renamed to image 200. So Lightroom isn't going to be able to find this image, but it'll be able to find the other 4 that now reappear in the folder. So let's just close this down and let's go back into Lightroom here, and you can see that Lightroom is already saying that for these images that a few minutes ago there was no original, there is now an original available. But because I renamed this one in the folder image 200, Lightroom still thinks it's not available. Now I want to update this folder to bring back in the additional image. So I'm just going to right click here and I'm going to go to the folder in the library so I can find it nice and quickly in the library. Here it is. I'm going to right click and choose Synchronize Folder. And I want to import the one new photo and remove the missing one from the catalog. So I'll just click Synchronize because this allows me to see the import dialog before I import. So the deleted image was removed. This is the one that Lightroom didn't know anything about, and I'm going to turn off Smart Preview. So this one's not going to have a Smart Preview built for it. Let's import it. It's now in the catalog of most recently imported images, but it's also in its own folder. So let's just open the folder. For this image we have an original photo, but there is no Smart Preview because we didn't create one. Let's go and delete this image from the disk and see what happens in Lightroom 4 and earlier, and also what will happen in Lightroom 5 if you don't build Smart Previews. Here's our folder of images that we're working with, and I'm just going to delete this one. And now let's close the Windows Explorer window. Here things have changed in Lightroom. The photo is marked as missing because there was no Smart Preview built for it. The fact that it's been deleted from disk now is a deal breaker. Lightroom can't find that photo, and if I go to try and open it in the Develop module, I'm told that the file cannot be found. So right now what we're seeing is the standard preview that's built when I import images into Lightroom, but you can see everything here is disabled. There's no way I can edit this image because it can't be found. So if you're working in Lightroom 5, the short answer is that you really should be building Smart Previews for your images if there's any chance that at some stage your images perhaps are on an external drive and that they may not be available when you come to work in Lightroom. If you want at least some portion of the image to be available in Lightroom, building a Smart Preview makes really good sense. But of course, the Smart Preview is something different to a regular preview. The regular previews are what happens and what you see when you click on an image and open it in the Develop module. This is the standard preview for that image, and it will show up while Lightroom in the background is building a one-to-one preview that I can then use for editing the image. So these two types of previews are very different. In most cases, what you'll want to do is to build both. You'll want Smart Previews so that you can edit your images even if they're not available, even if they're on a disk that has been removed from the computer. And you'll want your regular previews so that when you open an image in the Develop module, it's quickly available for editing even while the one-to-one preview is being built up in the background. And of course, if you're working with a Lightroom catalog that has been upgraded from earlier versions of Lightroom, there simply won't be Smart Previews for most of the images that have come up from those earlier versions of Lightroom because Smart Previews weren't available in those versions of Lightroom. For those images, you'll want to go back and select them and then create Smart Previews for them. The Smart Previews will be stored alongside the Lightroom catalog, so wherever your Lightroom catalog is, so too will your Smart Previews be stored. And as I've already mentioned, Smart Previews are around 5 to 10% of the original file size. So they're a small file, but they're extremely useful when you're working in Lightroom. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more of my video tutorials here on my YouTube channel. And consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.